It is not just an insurrection in Los Angeles. It is sedition and it is invasion. The riots we saw over this past weekend are continuing into today. They expect to have a large organizational phone call later tonight about protests against Donald Trump. As for the riots specifically in LA, they expect to continue them tonight. And these are the rioters, I'm saying. And I'll explain to you very quickly, just to kick things off, why it's all of the things I described. An insurrection. People in California rising up against the government and law enforcement refusing to intervene. This qualifies as an insurrection under the Insurrection Act. You have sedition. American citizens actively subverting the rule of law and obstructing the government from carrying out lawful duties to aid and abet foreign invaders. And why it's an invasion? Well, millions of non-citizens illegally entered this country and today fly the flag of their home nation as they enter this country in violation of its laws, seeking treasure. That's what it was called in the olden days, my friends, seeking treasure. Donald Trump has seized control of the California National Guard. They've been deployed. Gavin Newsom is outraged, demanding Trump return control of the National Guard to him. Trump says the Insurrection Act is not off the table, and the Marines are being prepped to deploy if need be. Even Pete Hegseth says, we can do it. Now, Democrats are defiant, saying this shouldn't be happening. I shouldn't be arresting people. Invaders, non-citizens, criminal aliens should be allowed to remain. And that's where we get into the heavy insurrection area. Now, of course, there's questions about where something like this goes. We don't know for sure. It could be a dramatic escalation. It could be that nothing happens. It could be a summer of love. Democrats could rally against Donald Trump over this and try and muster up a win in the midterms and maybe in 2028, but it's hard to say for sure. Certainly on the extreme ends of these things, we have Trump fails to deport anybody. Democrats are able to muster up their additional 20 or so congressional seats and electoral college votes to subvert the will of the American people and never lose an election again. Come 2028, they take the presidency, having won the midterms, impeaching Donald Trump. Not that he'd be convicted. And then the 2030 census comes up. All of these non-citizens brought in by Joe Biden are now counted in the census. And California, Illinois, New York, Oregon, Washington, they get a mass bolstering of the congressional seats, securing their cheating. That's right. It's cheating when you get extra electoral college votes because you let in illegal immigrants. The other extreme end, of course, would be that Donald Trump succeeds, deports everybody, and Democrats never win again. And then obviously there's the substantially less likely, but still on the table, Democrats refuse to lose. Democratic governors rise up against Donald Trump. Trump invokes the Insurrection Act, deploying the military against these invasive and seditious forces. And then the Democratic governors form a coalition, put together their National Guards to defy the federal government. The National Guard leadership then has to make a decision, your home state or the country. And I think you know my point with that one. Now, I don't know what's going to happen. I think rioting throughout the summer is just the most likely. I don't know that it extends beyond what we see already. The riots will be bad. Donald Trump will continue to use all of these tools in his arsenal to make sure these mass deportations happen. But I'm not sure enough deportations will happen. And with the resistance, it's going to obstruct Trump's ability to do so. I think we're looking at some kind of middle of the road scenario where Trump will be successful to some regard, but I don't know who wins in the end. It's hard to say for sure. It's a question I've asked many liberals who believe this couldn't have happened, despite the fact that a year ago we all predicted it. I asked several liberals, do you think Trump will use the military to enforce mass deportations? They said yes. Do you think Democrats will let it happen? Some said yes. Some said no. Well, let's take a look at the current state of affairs, the response from the Democratic Party and the Mexican president basically sanctioning what we are seeing. This is an invasion. Make no mistake. You have millions of non-citizens coming from various Central American countries, some of which are coming from Mexico. The Mexican president says these people here in the United States illegally are not criminals and should not be stopped. That is the sanctioning of the Mexican government for the criminal activities of non-citizens entering our country, to which the U.S. government is trying to expel. And they're flying the Mexican flag. So I don't know what you want to call it, but I'll call it that. My friends, smash the like button, share the show with everyone you know. My name is Tim Pool, hosting your Rumble Noon Hour as we transition into this afternoon. Thank you for joining me. Shout out to Steven Crowder and the Mug Club. It is with his support we're able to do this show to a much larger audience, thanks to you guys who watch Crowder. And I'm a big fan. He does great work. He's got a great show, and I really do appreciate the raid. So want to send that appreciation. But don't forget, we also have an amazing sponsor, my friends. It is AmericanFinancing.net. Don't forget to go to AmericanFinancing.net/Tim. We're all feeling it, my friends. Costs are rising on everything: gas, groceries, home repairs. If you're a homeowner, you probably thought, should I call American Financing to refinance and pay off that credit card debt? Then you second guess yourself because that low mortgage rate you currently have. Listen, that low rate, it's not saving you if you're drowning in credit card interest at 25% or more. That's the math no one wants to face, but it's costing you thousands. Here's the truth. If you're only making minimum payments, that debt will follow you for years. That's why people are calling American Financing, because they're saving customers an average of $800 a month by using their equity to finally break free from credit card debt. You owe it to your family to see what's possible. No upfront fees, no pressure. It costs you nothing to find out what you could save every month. And if you start today, you may be able to delay 2 mortgage payments. Call American Financing today at 866-890-7811. Once again, that's 866-890-7811, or visit AmericanFinancing.net/Tim. And don't forget, my friends, head over to Timcast.com. Join our Discord server. Many of you may be sitting at home, you watch the news, you don't know how to get involved. Maybe you're somebody who wants to start a business. Maybe you want to create art. Maybe you want to make a video game. Maybe you want to write a book and you don't know where to begin. Maybe you want to lose weight and get fit. All of that is possible and more. We built this community at Timcast.com so that you guys can have these in-person meetings, these online meetings, and collaborate. Already, several podcasts have launched, and I kid you not, several people have gotten married. Not that it's like a dating service, I'm just saying. Community is one of the most important things we can build if we want to win a culture war. When you become a member, you also get to call in to our uncensored show, 10 p.m. Monday through Thursday, in Timcast IRL at rumble.com/Timcast IRL. And your chats even appear on the show for everybody to see. So once again, smash that like button, share the show. You can follow me on X and Instagram. Let's get into the first story here, breaking down the Insurrection Act from Fox LA. Insurrection Act is not off the table for LA, Trump says. President Donald Trump says he won't rule out invoking the Insurrection Act as violent protests against federal immigration officers continue in LA for a third day. National Guard troops clashed with protesters Sunday, firing tear gas at crowds as protesters moved on the freeways surrounding downtown and blocked traffic. Police said 2 LAPD officers were injured after they were hit by motorcyclists who tried to breach a skirmish line. This is crazy. Let me show you some imagery. The famous image that has been circulating. This is an invasion, okay? And I'll tell you where it gets real difficult. This man wearing a mask, riding a dirt bike amid fires in LA and waving the Mexican flag. Another video of a man burning the American flag while the group waves the Mexican flag, and he says, "That is not my flag is the Mexican flag." You know what the biggest problem with birthright citizenship is? The biggest problem? Now, you can say it's anchor babies. You can say it's, exploitation, whatever you want to say. I'll tell you. It's that people who are born here are not inherently allegiant to this country. That includes people whose parents are American, whose grandparents are American. But the issue with this is, if large amounts of individuals, millions of people come into this country over the span of a few years, and they have kids, or even going back 20 years, these people, they still go home for vacation. They still fly their home flag. They raise their children to be adherent to that nation. This is true of any country throughout all of human history. This is how occupation works. A foreign military, a foreign group enters your country. They're adherent to a different set of moral worldviews or ideologies or national sovereignty. They fly those flags, and over a long enough period of time, you're gone. These young men, many of whom are American citizens, by the way, were raised in a state that they were told was property of Mexico, was land of Mexico before the Mexican-American War. They hate America. They hate American politics. They have been flying Mexican flags for years. And now they say it. They said it back then, too. The issue right now is that Joe Biden has allowed in 10 million non-citizens from various countries, not all from Mexico, from Central America, some from Africa, some from China, Iran, Afghanistan. And when ICE and Donald Trump, under the will of the American people through the popular vote, with immigration being the second most prominent issue, seek to enforce the law, they are obstructed by individuals, some of whom were born here, granted American citizenship by birthright, but who oppose the federal government's effort to maintain its national sovereignty and the will of the people. Now just think about it. Red and blue, left or right, whatever you want to call it. If you have a growing faction of individuals that keep allowing non-citizens to come in and welcome their worldview into their voting bloc, the voting bloc increasingly becomes more supportive of open borders so that other people can come in. The analogy I often use is quite simple. You and your roommate live in a house. Every Friday you vote for what's for lunch. And it's a back and forth because there's two of you. One day you come in, there's a guy sleeping on your couch, and you're like, yo, what's with this guy on my couch? Let's just say in this scenario, your name is Ronald. And your roommate says, Ron, that's my buddy. He's got nowhere to go. I'm letting him sleep on the couch. And you argue over it. And he says, let's make a deal. You can pick lunch for the next month, but just let my buddy crash here for now. And he goes, okay, that's a good deal. A month goes by. And the dude's still there. Next thing you know, you come in the living room, there's a second guy in there sleeping on the other couch. And you're like, what's this? It's like, it was my buddy. And you say, Ron, look, we got to cut a deal. We got to cut a deal. Here's what happens. Say, you know what? No, I'm putting my foot down, okay? I'm not going to allow your friends to stay here anymore. Well, now couch guy number one and your roommate say, let's put it to a vote. All in favor of letting our new friend sleep on the couch? They both raise their hand. You go, whoa. He doesn't get a vote. He doesn't live here. Actually, after a month, he does. He's now a legal resident of the house. You can't evict him. He gets a say. So 2 against 1, our friend can stay. Yeah, that's what happened in this country. It seems quite simple. The people who are born here but whose parents still vacation and have family in other countries, I'm not just saying just Mexico, they're going to vote in favor of sending resources and allowing their family members to come in. Over a long enough time, this will erode and break down the barriers that make America a sovereign nation. Now, a lot of migrants who come here legally integrate, and that's fantastic. But those that come in illegally are less likely to. Now we have this issue bubbling up where people are flying foreign flags in our country. The political news, let's carry it on. From the Washington Post, Trump charts new territory in bypassing Newsom to deploy National Guard. Legal experts question the president's response to unrest in L.A., saying he appears to be laying groundwork for more expansive use of the military to suppress dissent. Well, why aren't Democrats stopping the riots? Because this is the policy of California. This is the policy of the Democratic Party. This is what I would refer to as privateers. We've seen this take many forms, but as a common tactic used throughout all wars. Maybe not every single war, but in modern warfare especially. Let's take a look at, as I've mentioned before, the colonial era. You had privateers and corsairs. The British Crown would say, hey, the French, we don't like them. Go and attack them, but don't fly our flag. They would sanction and often supply privateers and tell them piracy was okay so long it was the French you were attacking. So if they saw a ship on the high seas flying a French flag, they'd attack. Capture, kill, seize. When word eventually got to France, like the ships are disappearing, after, we found the flotsam, it looks like it was pirates, it looks British. The French would send an emissary to the British Crown and say, you are attacking us. They'd say, those are simply pirates. Oh, heavens me, we don't sanction that. That's not us. That's what California is doing right now. We see it today in modern warfare with hacker groups. A hacker group will operate in Russia or China, attack American infrastructure, and their governments will deny any knowledge and say, these criminals, we'll arrest them if we find them. But we know they're sanctioned. And they're not going to face obstruction because they're attacking the enemies of that country. California is standing down. The reason why they don't want the National Guard deployed, the reason why the police aren't doing anything, they want illegal immigrants in the state. They're a sanctuary state. They do this so they can cheat elections. That's the harsh reality. From the post-millennial, 500 active duty Marines are prepared to deploy to LA. Now, I'll tell you why this is insurrection. Because people are flying foreign flags. You may say, Tim, posse comitatus. You cannot use the military to enforce local laws. I win. And my response is, indeed. But when we have non-citizens and people flying foreign flags, that is a function of military enforcement to deal with. Now, if you want to argue posse comitatus, because you're saying that the Army, the Marines, the Air Force, whatever, the Navy, can't arrest someone for jaywalking, I'll say, agreed. And the argument they're going to make is, these are just protests. They're protests. No, it's seditionist, insurrectionist, and invasive attacks and riots. So, is everybody who's rioting a citizen? Or is it that those that are rioting are working at the behest of a foreign entity? Indeed, that's the case. In which case, Trump invoking the Insurrection Act is exactly what the law is for. The post-millennial reports. CNN reported that the U.S. Northern Command has said about 500 U.S. Marines were prepped to deploy to L.A. to quell the riots that have broken out there for 3 straight days. On Sunday, planned protests at the federal courthouse turned to riots after the protesters were moved away from the area.
I also want to ask you about some breaking news that we're just getting in. This is brand new into our newsroom, that the U.S. Northern Command is saying that approximately 500 active duty Marines are, quote, prepared to deploy, in their words, as unrest in Los Angeles continues. This is after, of course, the Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, had mentioned this. Is that necessary at this point?
No, not operationally, it's not necessary. There may be other reasons for it. I want to just put this.
We don't know that we need the Marines just yet. And I think that's fair across the board to say. Trump has deployed around 2,000 National Guard to Los Angeles after riots erupted. Pete Hegseth said that if necessary, he could deploy Marines. We've got a problem. We got a political problem. There's no answer. There's no easy answer. I ask it to you, and you can comment. Let me know what you think. Join in the fun. Democrat governors band together to condemn Trump's deployment of National Guard in California. They're flying foreign flags. And Democrat governors are on the side of non-citizens. You have this. Let's roll, baby. From livemint.com, migrants are not criminals. Mexico President Claudia Sheinbaum criticizes LA raids. This crossed the line. Now we're getting serious. Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum defended migrants living in Los Angeles and claimed that at least 35 Mexicans had been detained in the recent raids carried out by immigration officers of the Trump administration. The arrests made in LA in the immigration raids triggered a wave of protests in the region, which has even led to the deployment of the U.S. National Guard. Quote, Mexicans living in the United States are good men and women, honest people who went to the U.S. to seek a better life for themselves and support their families. They are not criminals. They are good men and women. Indeed. Sheinbaum also stated that multiple Mexicans were arrested in the ongoing immigration raids. The count, as suggested by her, currently stands at 35. During her moving speech, she asked everyone to stand by the arrested Mexicans. And there it is. As it's been interpreted, many have said that she has called for the rioting. You cannot, you should not allow a foreign leader to defend these invaders and then call on those in this country to defend them. We are entering very serious territory here. These are not citizens. She even said these are Mexicans who are in the United States. Immigration is arresting and deporting individuals who are not here legally. That's normal sovereignty. This is not, it's not special. It's not unique. Countries remove people who enter illegally. I don't care if you're France, Japan, or Burundi. You enter the country illegally, you're subject to removal. That is defense of a sovereign nation. What do you do when your neighboring country tells people in your country to stand by and defend people who have entered illegally that you are seeking to enforce against? This is encouragement of invasion. But they're seeking a better life. Of course they are. Why else would anyone invade any other country? Did the Vikings seek a better life when they ransacked, raped, and pillaged in the British Isles? Of course they did. I'm not suggesting the Mexicans coming to this country are burning buildings down, although some in the riots apparently are. The overwhelming majority are trying to get jobs. But this is illegal, and this country seeks to defend its borders. From the most ridiculous of invasions, the argument has always been a better life. For what other reason? When religious fanatics invade another country, they say it's because these poor people are being exposed to a false god, and we can give them a better life. They should be adhering to us. The world leaders don't come out and say, like, we want to make their lives worse. Sometimes, don't get me wrong. I'm saying it's a tendency. It's a tendency. The Vikings raid the British Isles. They rape and pillage so they can make their lives better. They steal the women, and they go back, and guess what? They did live better lives. They got free stuff, stealing chickens and young women, stealing treasure. When people come into this country, displacing our workforce, and many of them committing crimes, not all of them, we, as a nation, have to protect our interests. This is where we get into very serious insurrectionist territory. And then what happens when Democrat governors defend them? This is where it gets truly scary. The Post-Atlanta reports, a coalition of Democratic governors issued a joint statement Sunday condemning Trump's decision to deploy the California National Guard without Newsom's consent, calling it an alarming abuse of power. In fact, it's not. They said it undermines both state and public trust. No, it doesn't. Trump would not, here's the question. Does Trump have the legal authority to take command of the National Guard of a state? Yes. Otherwise, it wouldn't have happened. If he didn't have that authority, the National Guard would have said no. I do believe we are entering the possibility of, I don't know how to describe it. Donald Trump occupying state governments, federal law enforcement, shutting down local law enforcement. It's what would you call it? Occupation, I suppose? In California, I suppose you can argue it's happening. The sheriff says he's not going to enforce these laws. The police are standing down. So Trump sends in the National Guard to stop this. ICE and the feds are going in to enforce federal law. If Democratic governors say we will not enforce the law, and then Trump has to send in National Guard or Marines and declare an insurrection, that's where things get real crazy. The occupation of Democratic states because they're refusing to enforce the law. And then at what point do we actually intervene at the federal level in their state governance? I mean, like beyond law enforcement. 22 Democratic governors have co-signed in a statement amid escalating violence. Let's pull this up. Here's their statement. Statement from the Democratic governors on Trump's use of the California National Guard. And it includes a big list. I'm not going to read all their names. President Trump's move to deploy California National Guard is an alarming abuse of power. Governors are the commanders-in-chief of their National Guard, and the federal government activating them in their own borders without consulting or working with their state's governor is ineffective and dangerous. Further threatening to send the U.S. Marines into American neighborhoods undermines the mission of our service members, erodes public trust, and shows the Trump administration does not trust local law enforcement. Well, they're refusing to enforce the law. What would one do? It's important we respect the executive authority of our country's governors to manage their National Guards. And we stand with Governor Newsom, who has made it clear that violence is unacceptable and that local authorities should be able to do their jobs without the chaos of this federal interference and intimidation. My friends, what we are getting, this is not the Democrats concerned about violence. This is not the Democrats concerned about local law enforcement being subverted. This is Democrats' subterfuge. 52 congressional seats and electoral college votes come from California because they're a sanctuary state with a massive illegal immigrant population. Joe Biden allowed in 10.5 million illegal immigrants into this country. If Trump does not deport them before the 2030 census, Democrats will bolster their vote count in Congress illicitly and their vote count in the Electoral College, and they'll never lose again. Well, to be fair, they'll lose to communist Republicans who shift leftward in a desperate attempt to try and muster up votes. I will say I blame Ronald Reagan and his Amnesty Act from 1986. This is where it all begins. he turned California into a permanent blue state. All of the immigration studies and scholars show this, and it's simple logic. If your parents are illegal immigrants and you are given birthright citizenship or amnesty, when it comes to a vote, what you voting for? Of course you're voting for your parents. That's your interest. It is not out of the question. It's not absurd or ridiculous to think an individual will always vote for what benefits them. That's the point of voting. What's in your interest? If the United States continues down the path of allowing for the interest of foreigners in this country, and I mean actual foreigners, I'm not talking about people who are even born here, you will get an erosion. That's why you need integration and controlled immigration. Immigration is great. Of course, what the media is doing, and the left, is they call illegal immigrants migrants. They say they're the same thing. They're not. Even then, you have a challenge if you have too much blanket migration. It's just stupidly simple. Okay, I'm going to be honest with you guys. Let's just simplify to the stupidest degree. If you've got 10 people from Italy, guess what they're having for dinner? I wouldn't be surprised if it was Italian food. It's a big Italian family, and they made a bunch of linguine with lots of sauce, Parmesan sprinkled on top, maybe some mozzarella. Sounds great. What do you think happens if you bring in 10 Mexicans? Are they going to all stand around and vote for Italian food? They're going to want to have Mexican food. They're going to want to have some mole sauce, which is also equally delicious. Now, hey, you know what? I like both. I love Italian food. I like gnocchi, and I like Mexican food. But if you're an Italian family, and one day they bring in 30, let's say, Ethiopians, when you vote for lunch, you're not getting Italian food. You're going to get Ethiopian food. It's good food, but it's not what you want. That's the point. People will always vote for their interests. And what's happening now is people who have fealty, who have allegiance to a foreign nation and non-citizens are firebombing vehicles and attacking federal law enforcement. You have yourselves an insurrection. What's the natural conclusion? Either Trump mass deports everybody, and then Republicans win, and Democrats are forced to the middle, which may be the case. Democrats win. Trump fails to deport anybody. The census comes around, and then Democrats win every election then because they get extra votes. Maybe something worse. Trump does begin mass deportations, refusing to give up factions of individuals, individuals who are allegiant to foreign countries or who are ideologically possessed, fight back. It was crazy for me to see videos of not just police being attacked. I saw a video of a man punching several cops in the face. I've never seen that before. I'm not kidding. I have seen people fight with cops. I have seen people de-arrest. I've never seen a man charge and start punching cops in the face during these riots. It is escalating, and the National Guard has been deployed. If someone chooses to drive it to the next escalation, that's when things get scary. Now, right now, my friends, we're going to be joined by Julio Rosas, who's been on the ground reporting. For those that want to watch that interview and you're watching the pre-recorded segment, make sure you check out youtube.com/Timcast or rumble.com/Timpool. That'll be up at 4 p.m. For everyone watching live, it'll be up in a few minutes. Don't forget to smash that like button, share the show with everyone you know. Stick around. Thanks for hanging out. We'll see you all in the next segment.